Ow, that sucked. I try to be consistent in reviewing a program based on its intentions. And that's what I'm gonna do here. Old School Iron advertises itself as an intermediate advanced program based on the greats of the golden age of bodybuilding. Not only did I read through this program for this review, but I did try 4 of the workouts, one from each of its 4 phases. So we are going to get into what my experience of trying to do these workouts as written was like as an intermediate trainee myself. As always, I'm going to start with my final score so you know what kind of review this is going to be. My final score is 5 out of 10. I picked this program up during lockdown, fully intending for this to be the first program that I followed once gyms were open again. That didn't happen, but it was just sitting there in my library. So when a commenter helpfully requested a review of this program, I finally felt that my $98 US had been well spent. So I tried it, and it's interesting. As usual with Rattlin Iron, there are components I absolutely do like. There are also components that I really did not like. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I will walk you through the alternative program that I wrote, and it is built off of the authentic principles, as far as I can tell, from those kind of golden age and slightly afterwards bodybuilders. So let's start with effectiveness, and on that I give it a 1 out of 2. This is the first Rattlin Iron program that I've encountered that offered a distinction between failure and form failure. And in the video explanations, he often provides examples of what would constitute form failure, what form breakdown you could experience in each exercise that would count as a form failure. He also states bluntly,
I believe you should train to failure. I think pushing yourself to failure is a prerequisite for ensuring that you're pushing yourself hard enough to create a stimulus for growth.
Nobody tell Arnold that. Did you see a failed rep? Did you see even really much of a grind? There's usually 2 to 3 reps in reserve, and that is actually really important. Because if you're doing the number of sets that Arnold and his contemporaries were doing in the gym, you can't be taking all those sets to failure. The fatigue cost is just too high. And also, if you look at his contemporary Mike Menser, who formed a little cult around the idea of high intensity training, that 1 set to failure concept, what do you think that was in response to? This program claims to be basing itself on these bodybuilders, these bodybuilding legends really, without actually adopting the ideas that they brought to the table. The program has 4 phases that are 4 weeks each. The first is modeled after the Golden 6. It is a strength phase. I would say this is the one that is the most beginner friendly because you're basically doing 3x5s, adding 5 pounds each week to a handful of exercises, squat, bench, dead, and overhead press. It has the fewest shticks of any Rattlin Iron program that I've seen. It seemed like progressive overload was going to be a feature of this program. The second phase is a push-pull legs power building phase. You're doing the big 3 in this kind of like undulating wave loading pattern. So you'll do a set of 5 at 80% of your 1 rep max, then a set of 1 at somewhere between like 92 and eventually like 102.5% of your 1 rep max, adding a little bit of weight to each subsequent single. We'll talk about what actually happens when you try that in the enjoyability section of this review. And apart from the big 3, the power lifts basically, the rest of these workouts are sort of a wave loading mechanical drop set. So you'll do like 1 exercise for a set of 5, and then another exercise for a set of 10, and then another exercise for a set of 20, and they're meant to be slightly easier as you work your way down the chain. Kind of a neat idea. The pumps you'll get out of it are definitely going to be pretty massive, and it's a pretty effective way to just blast through all the remaining volume of the workout after you've spent what is going to be a lot of time on the primary lift of the day. The third block is like a torso, legs, and shoulders and arms split. I think it's a pretty good way of distributing volume. And this is the phase that, while it deprioritizes strength, it kind of continues that trend of going towards more hypertrophy-focused training. It does keep a few 5x5s and 3x8s. Honestly, I think this one is also really well structured as a block to include like a lot of intensity techniques, a lot of varied rep ranges, and again, really, really good pumps. And then the last phase is a full-blown bro split. A lot of intensity techniques are also featured in this final block. It also, and probably my favorite feature of this last one, is that it has sort of a sample platter of these old school bodybuilding exercises, often ones that you don't really see anymore because machines have largely rendered a lot of these exercises unnecessary, but some of them are pretty fun. And I think giving people the opportunity to try movements they may never have encountered before is a good use of a program like this. The first phase features a designated, because it's only 3 main workouts a week, similar to what they did in Total Beast. The sort of Tuesday and Thursday workout slots are for abs and classic correctives. These are the normal staple of Athlean-X, kind of prehab exercises. Generally, this type of movement is for filling in a known gap. Like if you know your rotator cuff is a weak point for your pressing movements, designated rotator cuff work for at least a few weeks may be a good idea. I would definitely treat those days as optional if you're going to run this. If you want to be in the gym those extra 2 days just to kind of round out the edges, then go for it. But look, you got shit to do, presumably. Now, the incorporation of corrective movements does go away after block 1, which makes a little bit of sense because if the idea is to sort of fill in a weak link in the chain, ideally that you should be in a position where you don't necessarily need that anymore by the time you move on, especially because, and this is a feature of the first phase that I actually like, you are encouraged to repeat it if you want to continue to see strength gains in that 3x5 format before moving on to the more hypertrophy focused blocks. The flaw here is that if this is really for intermediate and advanced trainees, you're not gonna get a lot of strength gains out of the 3x5s. Your squat and deadlift might be able to gain some strength for a while, depending on how conservative you were when you started, because it does do that thing where it says start with 75 to 80% of your 1 rep max. 5 reps at 80% of your 1 rep max isn't necessarily maximal for most people, but it's pretty close. So adding 5 pounds per session, that is gonna catch up to you. If you are a novice and you are coming to this program as a novice, I think you should plan to run that first block multiple times in a row to get your newbie gains up front. Once you have that settled, then move on to the others. There is no need to rush. You are going to get a lot out of that, especially because the accessories are also chosen very well in that first block. So coming back to the reason why I give this a 1 out of 2 in effectiveness, you will get stronger and you will grow muscle. I am not disputing that. I do think, though, that Athlean-X obsession with having novelty every single workout that starts to kick in block 2 onwards is going to hamper your gains, especially if you're like me and you find yourself just getting so toasted by this stuff that you're not really terminating your sets because your muscle is not moving the load anymore. If I'm doing, for example, a 15 to 20 rep max effort of goblet squats, I'm stopping because I'm fucking tired. On usability, I'm going to give it the highest score of this review. It's getting a 1.5 out of 2. And that is because the portal, the videos, the tracking sheet, the 1 rep max calculator, all the features that I've praised in previous Athlean-X programs on this channel are still present here. And if anything, the standard of detail being incorporated has definitely gone up over the years. And you can see he has fixed a lot of the problems that I found in prior programs. The walkthrough videos are much more detailed, for example. He really does try his best to explain the idea behind all of these different things that he's doing. I don't think he does a good job of necessarily explaining the why, but he does explain the how. And these walkthroughs are very important because there are a lot of intensity and volume protocols that are being used throughout the 4 blocks of this program. Bodybuilders that I'm aware of will often use maybe like 1 or 2 of these protocols in their training at any given time. What kind of dings that half point from the usability for me as a result of that is that he is basically forcing people to learn so many different protocols session to session and week to week that it can make the process a little more confusing because you don't really have the opportunity to build up your skill on something like doing rest pause sets or drop sets. Constantly changing protocols and techniques and exercises, basically making things more complicated. I've talked about this before, but for me, that does not make a program better, but it does impact its user friendliness because it is making it more complex. And the question that you need to answer if you are going to be selling a program is, why is that complexity there? Is it to make the program more effective at what it is trying to do? What I see in old school Iron and what I see in a lot of Athlean-X programming is very much the novelty is there to be novelty. It is there to keep you from getting bored. And if you're someone who gets so bored from training, you need new exercises, new protocols, new intensity techniques. It's all gotta be completely changed. I'm not here to judge, but that is something you should maybe think about. If you like it, and if that's what keeps you coming to the gym, fantastic. Go for it. I just want to make sure you are choosing this on those grounds, that you're doing it because you enjoy the novelty aspect of it enough to forego what would be a more basic approach to training that would most likely yield you slightly better results. On flexibility, it gets 0 out of 2. It has to. There is no flexibility. There is no room for choice, no room for substitution, no room for adaptation. And unfortunately, being Athlean-X, he just can't help himself but to have his kinesiophobia, his fear of movement, leak into the programming.
We're not gonna go wide grip barbell bench press. If you have any type of limitation of motion in your shoulders at all, it becomes a hell of a lot more difficult to do the exercise safely. So as I step forward here, I'm driving my weight forward and down, which means I have an opposite force from the ground up, right, and they kind of meet right here on the kneecap. And there's a lot of stress around the kneecap and around the patellar tendon, because we know that we are fighting our own anatomy. I talk about it all the time. When you get your elbows all the way back here, you're outside the scapular plane, which is not a normal biomechanical pressing plane. So when we take an upright row, we're allowing our elbows to lead the way and our wrists to stay and our hands to stay below and down, which creates internal rotation of the shoulder, which we don't want to do, especially with elevation. This is horrible. If you've watched me for any length of time, you realize I cannot stand the dumbbell bench fly. Arnold Schwarzenegger actually did all of his basic pressing from this position too, which is probably why it didn't kill him.
I've said it before and I will say it again. If a movement is comfortable for you to perform, it is almost certainly not injurious to perform, especially if you are starting with a reasonably light load and gradually progressing to higher intensities as you become more proficient. That is basic training theory, and it is really weird to see somebody this prominent who doesn't seem to understand that. I'm also just going to say on the flexibility front that while in that FAQ section, like I mentioned before, the program is advertised as being potentially beginner friendly if you just pace yourself, you have to be able to do 8 chin-ups. There is no substitution there. That is exactly what's written. You have to sort yourself out if that's not something you're able to do and you come up to that exercise slot. That's in block 1. You have to be able to do behind the neck chin-ups after doing curls to failure. If you can't do that, this program is going to feel very bad because you are going to be made to feel incompetent and weak. Which brings me to enjoyability. I'm giving it a 1 out of 2, and I will make it very clear why. I tried 4 workouts, I liked 2 of them, and I fucking hated the other 2. Let's talk about each one. The first session I did was a session from block 1, that linear progression 3x5 phase. Meat and potatoes training, straight sets on basic compound and isolation movements, Like, this is a style of training that is not that different from what I currently do. I tend to, at this point, have more sophisticated periodization for my mains because I am an intermediate powerlifting trainee with a meet coming up. I was recovering from a head cold when I did this, so I was not really feeling my strongest, but I got through the whole thing in an hour, and it was a nice session to return to training with after taking a week off. I definitely overshot on those squats though. I forgot to bring my belt, and I kind of also forgot when entering my 1 rep max that I was basing it on my belted 1 rep max. So mistakes were made. Oops, I did it anyway. Now for session 2, I'll admit, I was a little skeptical. I decided to go for deadlift day because the deadlift is my strongest exercise. And I wanted to see if this protocol, this undulating wave loading protocol, would actually work, if it would actually allow me to do this sort of pyramiding 5s into singles, into 5s into singles, working my way up in weight in those singles as I went. It sounds pretty beastly, and so I figured, all right, let's give her.
All right, kid, let's go!
If I had been able to pull that off, I would have exited the gym through a brick wall instead of the door. Instead, of course, I couldn't even do the first single at 92.5% because I was only given 90 seconds of rest after doing a set of 5 at 80% of my 1 rep max. I will say I didn't like the 5, 10, 20 sort of pyramids. I don't like having to scramble between multiple exercises on a dime, but the pumps were really good. My lats and biceps were absolutely torched. So I can definitely see someone really enjoying training this way. I will say I would have preferred a more straightforward drop set approach, just sticking with 1 exercise, doing 5 reps, bring down the load, do 10 reps, bring down the load, do 20 reps. For something like the lat pull down, that is very possible. And it was actually a part of it, but I had to stand up and do this tripod dumbbell row in between. So I didn't love that so much. This was a very disheartening workout to do. Not even being able to do the first single of those deadlifts, it sucked. It sucked. It ruined my mood, and I can only imagine desperately trying to just load the plates on and take them off again and just somehow do this, because I tried that first single multiple times in a row and I just couldn't do it. Session 3. I liked this one. It was a shoulder day, shoulders and arms, with most of the work being very pump focused work for the shoulders, although the first 2 exercises were 3 sets of 10 to 12 on the Arnold press and the upright row, the
dumbbell high pull,
and taking the last set into a drop set with half of the working weight. Absolutely fantastic, great pumps, great potential for overload. I really liked this part of the workout. Then there was this like rest pause superset of lateral raises and front raises, which I didn't understand the instructions. I went through the video, I went through the written instructions. I couldn't tell if I was supposed to be basically just never stopping, just doing a set of lateral raises, rest pausing into a set of front raises, rest pausing into a set of laterals. I think that was the idea, but at first I misread it and I just did a superset and was trying to like rest pause my way through the front raises, essentially. But it wasn't even clear what I'm trying to do with these rest pauses. Am I just taking them to failure, even if that's like 5 reps? Rest pause is an excellent training technique, especially if you are a believer in the effective reps model of training. If I understand what I'm supposed to be doing in those supersets correctly, again, I think it's a really great bit of pump work after you've done sort of the meat and potatoes, pressing and pulling. Lastly, I had to do this like plate press out thing where there was 120 total reps, like 40 in each of the 3 directions, broken up into as many sets as it takes. I don't usually love burn training all that much, and I also don't think it's especially important. I don't see myself doing training like this a whole lot, but I definitely know that there are those of you who absolutely love doing that sort of thing. And if that is the case, I think that you will get a lot out of the pumps that you get from this particular block of training. Also, I'm just gonna say it, I did not expect to like doing a 5x5 on the barbell curl, but I did. Got a decent bicep pump out of doing that. It was all done in an hour, really solid workout. And then session 4. I picked quad day. because I knew I had to try the one that was gonna hurt the most. Cavalier, in one of his marketing videos on AthleanX, has claimed that the process of rolling out these programs on athleanx.com,
I have to come up with the ideas, implement them in my own training, put them into my athletes' protocols, rely on their feedback, and then get them to you.
This workout demonstrates that if that has ever been true, it definitely wasn't for this program. I'll start with what I liked, and what I liked was the first exercise. The final phase, like I mentioned before, it kind of has a sampling, kind of a flight of these more obscure bodybuilding exercises. So for the first quad day, what he programmed was the feet together squat, and when I looked it up, what I found was the Platz squat, which is feet together plus elevated heels. I decided to do that version. Oh my God, I love this exercise. I love it, I love it, I love it. It felt like a hack squat without having to use a machine. The profile was so difficult coming out of the bottom, and it required almost no weight. I had 95 pounds on my back for that. So for targeting the quads without getting too much axial fatigue, too much systemic fatigue, I think this is a great exercise and I'm keeping it. That's the only part of this workout that I thought was good, or that I enjoyed. Something fucking stupid happens next. The technique that the next few exercises are built around is pre-exhaust. What most of the workouts in this week look like is that the pre-exhaust is you're doing like an isolation move, like a fly, and then you immediately go into a press. So you've exhausted the main mover, but you can keep pressing out, presumably, so it's a way to extend the set in a way. What this workout required of me was taking a goblet squat to form failure within 15 to 20 reps, followed immediately by taking the same amount of weight and performing Bulgarian split squats to failure. Can you imagine, just think this through for a second, what the flaw might be in going from a stable bilateral squat, taking that to failure, and then without rest, taking the same load on a unstable unilateral squat? Did you figure it out yet? I didn't need to test this to know it wasn't going to work, but I did it for you. I did it for you, so you'd better put a like on this video. You better like this video, you'd better subscribe to my channel, and you'd better tell me that it was worth it. Not to mention, even if it was physically possible to do this the way that it's written, when you're supersetting a 2-limb exercise with a 1-limb exercise, one of those limbs gets rest and the other doesn't. So it doesn't even really work as a superset, especially not if the intention is to pre-exhaust the muscle. It then had a second superset where I had to do this booty babe dumbbell drop squat with almost no range of motion into reverse alternating dumbbell lunges with the same total load. Once again, my stabilizers and frankly, my cardiovascular fitness would not allow me to even try. And I did try. I tried anyway, but I was just so Bambi wobbly that I could not do it. It didn't even feel like my quads were that much of a limiting factor. Like, despite doing a whole bunch of work yesterday, my quads are only kind of sore, and I'm thinking that's because I had to terminate sets earlier because of how much cardiovascular fatigue. My heart was pounding and racing. My whole system was falling apart on me, and the demand of these one-legged exercises after already pushing to fatigue on something else just made it impossible to really push the muscle as hard as it could go. And I can hear some of you watching this already saying, well, that's my problem for not building up my stability so that I could handle that demand. And to you, I say, it's a bodybuilding program. That should not be the priority. The priority should be doing things that grow the fucking muscle. And if you're not going to do that, don't call it old school iron, because I guarantee you, these guys didn't give a shit about their one-legged goddamn stability. Cavalier has kind of painted himself into a corner on this one. These workouts would be frankly more enjoyable and possibly more effective, and at the very least, they'd be more doable for more people if they included movements like sissy squats, leg extensions, leg press, hack squat, belt squat, but he can't. And the reason is because, one, in a lot of cases, he just doesn't own the equipment to do them, and he's already put some of these exercises into his iron graveyard, like the sissy squat and leg extension. So the most effective quad isolation movements are off limits, and so everything has to be a squat. Everything has to be compound and probably axially loaded so that your whole system is getting drained in the process of trying to stimulate one muscle group. That doesn't make any sense. If you have no choice but to do this sort of thing because of limitations of equipment, you can still isolate the quads. You can do sissy squats, you can do reverse Nordic extensions, but those are not present here. So that's how I felt about that workout. And lastly, on value, I'm going to have it also be a 1.5 out of 2, because as with usability, most of the features that keep Rattlin X feeling as slick and professional as it generally does these days are all still present. For my thoughts on the meal plan, unfollowable. No functioning human adult with a job or any other responsibilities can be expected to prepare this many different meals and snacks every single day, especially considering that there are no recipes or portions for any of these meals. And without that, a meal plan is useless. And the other ding I do think matters to bring up here as far as the program's value is that beginners are going to do it. That hedging in the FAQ and just the crowd that Rattlin X draws, his main target market is young beginners. There are exceptions, obviously, but that is who this marketing is for. The thing that I'm always concerned about with something like this is that this is going to mislead people into believing that this is what effective training looks like. And the style of training that is on display here is complicated and exhausting. It is so hard to do a lot of these workouts, especially in that last block. Now, if you are someone who finds that motivating and enjoyable, fill your boots. I'm not trying to yuck your yums here, but I am concerned that if you are not someone for whom this particular style of training is enjoyable, and instead you respond to it the way that I did, which is to feel honestly very discouraged, dreading going to the gym, is that a recipe for someone who is going to sustainably hit their goals in their own fitness journey overall, if this is how they're starting it? Is this going to lead them to doubt the effectiveness of a more simple, fundamental approach to training, ideally one that is less preoccupied with failure, less preoccupied with complex intensity protocols, something that actually resembles the training of the bodybuilders that this program purports to be inspired by? And that's the real shame here. You are not going to learn a lot about old school bodybuilding from following this program. And part of the problem is that Cavalier has spent his entire public career demonizing exercises that these guys built their careers on. All sets are taken to failure, which, while it does keep the workouts short, that's a Mike Mentzer thing. That's a Dorian Yates thing. It's not that there aren't guys who did take all sets to failure. They aren't even really cited here. Instead, it's taking inspiration from Arnie, from Ronnie. He even cites Reg Park in the first phase with the 3x5s. And lastly, the prioritization of novelty over progressive overload, which is a staple of Rattlin X programming, kind of for me shows this program to be what it really is. You will try some new exercises that are inspired by these bodybuilding greats, and you will work your ass off, and if you do it consistently, you will make gains. But what this is an ordinary Rattlin X program that just so happens to be borrowing some clout from the bodybuilding greats. That's it. And that's really too bad. Now, the good news is that if you did want to try a training program that is very directly inspired by the training of those old school bodybuilding greats, I've got one for you. It's free. The link to it is in the doobly-doo below. I called it Rattlin Iron because I can be cheesy too. It is an intermediate advanced, very high volume bodybuilding program. Lots of sets, none of which are taken to failure. Lots of different exercises, often 9 per session. The spreadsheet includes detailed instructions on how to perform the program, using not just rep ranges, but also set ranges. You actually pick how many sets you want to do for each exercise. You can kind of figure that out for yourself as you train based on your own subjective feeling of fatigue as you progress. And this really does matter because this is a very difficult way to train, and a lot of the guys that could succeed training this way had some pharmaceutical assistance. I accidentally recorded too long, ran out of disk space, and had to cut it off. So I'm just gonna finish by saying, try the program, or at least take a look at it. It's free. You can make a copy for yourself. Let me know how it goes if you end up using it. Let me know if you have any programs that you would like me to review. Just put it down in the comments below, and I will be happy to take a look and make another video like this just for you. Just for you. I mean, at this point, with the subscriber count I'm currently rolling with, it more or less is just for you. So I hope it makes you feel special. Thank you so much for the recommendation to do this one. Now just go get friggin' strong.